Our main character is Kaneki, a poor guy living an ordinary life, shy and introverted. One day, while sitting with his friend in a restaurant, a stunningly beautiful girl walked in. The moment Kaneki saw her, he fell in love with her instantly. He noticed she was reading the same book as he was. He kept glancing at her occasionally, and when she smiled at him, his admiration for her grew even more. Later, they agreed to meet at another restaurant. The next day, they met and had a great time together. She introduced herself and told him her name was Raz. Afterward, she asked him to walk her home because she was feeling scared. Kaneki agreed and accompanied her until they reached her neighborhood. As they entered a dark alley, Kaneki tried to get closer to her, saying, "I hope we can meet again." Suddenly, she hugged him and said, "Our feelings are mutual, Kaneki. I love you." Kaneki was overjoyed, but then he felt a terrifying aura emanating from her. Her eyes turned red and black, and she opened her mouth and bit him. Kaneki was shocked and began to realize that this girl wasn't human. He remembered the news about ghouls, creatures that resemble humans but feed on their flesh. Kuniki fell to the ground bleeding heavily, while Rize revealed her true form, complete with bloody scales. He tried to escape, but he couldn't. She grabbed him, threw him against the wall, and stabbed him, causing him to bleed even more. He was on the verge of death, but then a miracle occurred. The cable holding a crane above them snapped, and the falling metal crushed Rize, killing her. Shortly after, the police arrived and took Kaneki to the hospital. He was in critical condition, with his internal organs severely damaged, making recovery impossible without organ transplantation. The doctors had no choice but to use Rize's organs and transplant them into Kaneki's body. As a result, Kaneki became half ghoul due to those organs. When he regained consciousness, the doctor reassured him, saying he was fine and could be discharged. Kaneki returned home feeling disgusted by what had happened to him. While watching the news, he heard someone discussing ghouls, mentioning that their only food source is humans and that their sense of taste is vastly different from humans, finding human food utterly repulsive and inedible. Terrified, Kaneki decided to test it himself. He tried eating various foods but vomited everything, even his favorite dishes. At that moment, he realized he had become a ghoul. He looked in the mirror and saw his eye turn red and black. Overcome with anger, he grabbed a knife, attempting to remove the transplanted organs, but when he stabbed himself, the knife shattered. He stepped onto the street feeling an overwhelming hunger, and every time he saw a human, he was consumed by an intense urge to eat them. Suddenly, he caught a delicious scent, reminiscent of his mother's cooking, and eagerly ran toward it. But when he arrived, he saw a ghoul devouring a human, with blood splattered everywhere. Koniki was horrified when he realized that the enticing smell was the scent of human flesh. He fell to his knees, crying. The ghoul, feeling pity for him, tore off a piece of the arm he was eating and said, "Here, take it. We're in the same situation." Suddenly, another ghoul appeared, killing the first one. He grabbed Kaneki and slammed him against the wall, saying, "How dare you trespass in my feeding area?" Kaneki tried to defend himself, saying, "I was just passing by, I didn't mean anything." But the ghoul didn't believe him and was about to kill him. At that moment, another ghoul, a female named Toka, appeared and told the attacker to leave Kaneki alone. The ghoul ignored her and attacked. Toka demonstrated her incredible strength and managed to wound him with a single strike, forcing him to flee. She then turned to Kaneki, raised the severed hand and said, "If you need it, take it." Kaneki hesitated and reached for it, but ultimately said, "No way, no way, no way, no way, no way. I can't be a ghoul, because I'm a human." Deep inside, however, he was battling his ghoul instincts, which were urging him to eat it. Kaneki began crying, overwhelmed by an intense internal struggle. Tuka told him, "If you refuse to eat it, I'll help you." She moved closer and forcibly shoved the piece of meat into his mouth. Kaneki was struck by its incredible taste but immediately tried to spit it out, saying, "Don't treat me like a ghoul. I'm human, not a monster like you." Tuka grew angry at his stubbornness and began beating him mercilessly. At that moment, an elderly man appeared and intervened to save Kaneki. He asked him to come with him. The man took Kaneki to another place and offered him a cup of coffee. Kaneki hesitated at first, but eventually tried it and was surprised by how good it tasted. The old man explained that coffee is the only food that ghouls can consume normally. However, he added, "Of course, coffee won't satisfy your hunger, so take this piece of meat to eat when the hunger becomes unbearable." Despite his reluctance, Kaneki took the piece of meat and left. Later, Toka asked the old man why he helped Kaneki. The man replied that he had heard about Reisa's death and the transplantation of her organs into Kaneki, making him a half-ghoul. He helped him because he believed Kaneki might prove useful to them. Meanwhile, Kaneki was at home. struggling with his intense hunger and trying to resist his ghoul instincts. Suddenly, Rise appeared in his mind, seducing him with dark thoughts of eating human flesh. She continued to pressure him until he grabbed the bag of meat, but a call from his friend interrupted him, calming him down and pulling him away from those thoughts. The next day, Kaneki went to school and saw his classmates enjoying their food, which filled him with regret. Later, he met his friend, who invited him to meet a new coworker and fellow university student. When they opened the door, Kaneki was shocked to see the new person. It was the same ghoul who had attacked him earlier. Both were stunned and stared at each other in disbelief. The ghoul approached him and said, "My name is Nishio. It's a pleasure to meet you, Kaneki." Afterward, they went outside where Nishio bought some pastries and shared them with everyone. Kaneki felt disgusted just looking at the cake, but was shocked when Nishio calmly ate it and even remarked how delicious it was. Kaneki tried to ignore it and continued walking, but suddenly Nishio kicked Kaneki's friend, sending him flying. Nishio grabbed Kaneki and punched him hard in the stomach, causing him to bleed profusely. Nishio then spat out food from his mouth and sneered, "I can't understand how humans can eat this trash." Then he kicked Kaneki's friend again and said, "I know you were planning to get close to him so you could eat him." Nishio mercilessly stomped on Kaneki's friend's face, causing him to bleed. At that moment, Kaneki's rage ignited and he attacked Nishio with his backpack. Nishio mocked him, saying, "What are you doing attacking me with a backpack? Are you a lady or something?" Nishio turned toward Kaneki's friend and unleashed his Kagune, preparing to end his life. As Kaneki remembered all his memories with his friend, his fury surged and he released his own Kagune. Consumed with hatred and anger, a fierce battle erupted between them, and Kaneki managed to deliver a blow that pierced Nishio's stomach. Although he had defeated Nishio, Kaneki continued stabbing him hysterically. Nishio screamed for mercy, apologizing, but Kaneki seemed to have lost his mind and kept stabbing until blood splattered everywhere. Finally, he tossed Nishio aside. Kaneki approached his friend, and in his mind, Rise appeared, tempting him by saying, "Look at him, fresh and delicious. Go on, eat him and enjoy the taste." Kaneki began succumbing to his instincts, craving to devour his friend. But suddenly he calmed himself, saying, "He's my best friend." Riza replied, "Exactly, because he's your best friend, you have the right to eat him." She continued manipulating his thoughts until he almost gave in. At that moment, Toka appeared and said, "Didn't you say you're not like us, and now you're about to eat your friend?" Kaneki angrily replied, "Stay out of my way or I'll kill you." Toka then unleashed her Kagune, and with a single strike, she knocked Kaneki unconscious. When Kaneki wakes up, he tastes blood in his mouth. The old man enters the room, and Kaneki asks him about his friend's whereabouts. The old man takes him to see his friend and assures him that he is fine. Kaneki confesses, "Hunger had completely taken over me, and I would have eaten him if Tuka hadn't intervened. But now, the hunger is gone, and there are traces of blood on my mouth. Tell me honestly, what did you do to me while I was unconscious?" The old man replies, "It's better if you don't know." At that moment, Kaneki realizes he had eaten human flesh, and he breaks down in tears, saying, "If I stay with my friend, I don't know if he'll be safe with me or not. So I have no choice but to stay away. I don't belong in the world of humans or ghouls." The old man responds, "No, you are both human and ghoul at the same time. You're the only one who has a place in both worlds. Live with us, and from now on you'll discover whether we're just savage monsters or ordinary people." Kaneki begins living with the ghouls at the cafe run by the old man, who tells him that they are a ghoul organization called Anteku. Both ghouls and humans visit the cafe, as it's seen as just a regular coffee shop. Meanwhile, the CCG, Commission of Counter Ghoul, a government organization aimed at eradicating ghouls, holds a meeting to discuss the rising number of murders in the 20th Ward. They decide to assign an investigator to search for ghouls in the air. Back to Kaneki, the old man offers him sandwiches and asks him to try eating them. Kaneki eats one, but finds it tastes terrible. However, the old man eats it with ease and tells him that it just takes practice, and over time he'll be able to eat human food like normal people. Still, the food must be removed later, as it could be harmful. Then he gives Kaneki sugar cubes, telling him to dissolve them in coffee whenever he feels hungry. Kaneki thanks him, but asks what they're made of. The old man replies that it's better not to know. After that, he asks Kaneki to take over the task of bringing food instead of Tuka, who is busy with her studies. Kaneki hesitates and says it's impossible for him to kill anyone. The old man reassures him that he won't need to kill anyone, and he'll understand once he goes. Indeed, Kaneki rides with one of the anti-Q members to a distant location near a high cliff. By accident, Kaneki slips and falls, but he uses his Kogane to break his fall. He finds a human corpse next to him and panics. The man climbs down to him and explains that many people come to this place to commit suicide, so they only take the bodies of suicide victims. He then orders Kaneki to put the corpse into the bag. Kaneki hesitates, feeling afraid, but the man begins praying for the deceased, calming him slightly. Meanwhile, the investigators begin hunting ghouls, eliminating everyone they encounter. They display terrifying skills, making it nearly impossible to face them. Later, Kaneki enters a room in Anteku and finds a girl eating, with blood splattered everywhere. Horrified by the scene, he apologizes and quickly shuts the door. Someone tells him that ghouls dislike being seen while eating, especially girls. Kaneki apologizes again and brings her a cup of coffee. The girl accepts his apology and he later gets to know her. Her name is Emi and she lives at Antaiku with her mother. Emi becomes extremely happy when Kaneki starts talking to her and teaching her how to write. Happy when Kaneki starts talking to her and teaching her how to write. One day, a man named Tsukukiyama enters the cafe. He approaches Kaneki and snatches him, saying, "You smell delicious. I'll see you later, dear Kiki." The man seems highly suspicious, and even Hyuka warns Kaneki to stay away from him. Later, Connie visits Toka's room, and while they are sitting together, her friend shows up to visit. When she sees Kaneki in the room, she is shocked and misunderstands the situation. She leaves behind a meal she had prepared for Toka and storms out. Kaneki asks Toka what she plans to do with the food. Toka responds that her friend went through a lot of effort to make it, so she will definitely eat it. She eats the meal even though it doesn't suit her, surprising Kaneki as he realizes Toka has a kind heart. The next day, Tsukiyama shows up at the university and talks to Kaneki, trying to get close to him. He says, "By the way, I love the same book you're reading. How about we go to the library together later?" Kaneki remembers Toka's warning and apologizes, saying, "Sorry, I can't." Tsukiyama responds with regret. "No problem. I apologize if I bothered you, but you're the only one who's like me." Most ghouls don't care about reading, and I had hoped to find a friend to discuss my favorite topics with. Moved by Tsukiyama's words, Kaneki agrees to go with him. Tsukiyama then lets out a sinister laugh. Later they go to the library, and while there, Kaneki accidentally cuts his finger. Tsukuyomi throws him a handkerchief for the wound and asks Kaneki to rest while he goes to wash it. Tsukuyomi enters the bathroom and sniffs the handkerchief obsessively, losing control in a hysterical frenzy. "Didn't I tell you, bro, that this guy was suspicious from the start?" After that, Tsukiyama invites Kaneki to a party. Kaneki begins preparing, putting on his suit, and getting ready to attend. Suddenly, darkness envelops the venue, and Kaneki finds himself lifted onto a stage-like area. Tsukiyama reveals his sinister plan. He wants to present Kaneki as a meal for all the guests. He throws the handkerchief with Kaneki's scent to the crowd and tells them to smell it, declaring they'll realize how delicious he is. The crowd gets excited, and the show begins as a monstrous creature enters the arena to attack Kaneki. Kaneki tries to escape, but the doors are locked, leaving no way out. The creature lands a powerful blow on him, nearly shattering his skull. Kaneki tries to defend himself but finds himself helpless. He falls to the ground only to be kicked violently into a wall. The monster grabs him and chokes him with such force it feels like his neck will break. At that moment, Kaneki taps into his ghoul powers, freeing himself and delivering a powerful punch that sends the monster flying. Everyone is stunned by Kaneki's strength, especially Tsukiyama, who is shocked when he sees Kaneki's single ghoul eye. One-eyed ghouls are extremely rare and possess extraordinary abilities. It's as if Tsukiyama loses his mind. He throws everyone aside and approaches Kaneki. He stops the fight, apologizes to him, and asks him to forget what happened. In his mind, he vows that no one else will taste Kaneki's flesh because he plans to eat him himself. Later, Kaneki is wandering the streets when he sees a group of thugs mercilessly beating someone. He realizes the person is Nishiki. Kaneki tries to intervene and speak calmly, but one of the thugs throws a punch that nearly takes his head off. The thugs begin attacking him, but Kaneki easily dodges their attacks, noticing how much his skills have improved. He counters one of them with a powerful blow, taking him down instantly. Afterward, Kaneki takes Nishiki home. Nishiki, surprised, asks why Kaneki is helping him. When Nishiki's wife opens the door, Nishiki tells her, "This is the guy who nearly killed me before and now he's helping me." Isn't it funny how life works? Kaneki then asks her how she can live with Nishiki, knowing he's a ghoul who kills people. She replies that she fell in love with him, and as long as he doesn't hurt her family, she chooses to look past it. Later, while walking, Nishiki's wife is suddenly kidnapped. The kidnapper turns out to be Tsukiyama. When Kaneki returns home, he finds a note from Tsukiyama telling him to come if he wants to get her back. At that moment, Nishiki arrives and learns about the situation, deciding to go with Kaneki. Tsukiyama is holding the woman captive in a church. When Kaneki and Nishiki arrive, a fight breaks out. Tsukiyama showcases his incredible strength, landing devastating blows on Kaneki, nearly breaking him. Suddenly, Toka appears and delivers a powerful strike to Tsukiyama, leaving a mark on his face. However, Tsukiyama quickly heals, rips off his shirt, and prepares to fight seriously. The battle begins between Tsukiyama and Toka. With Kunichi also stepping in to fight for his own justice, the two launch a combined attack that nearly defeats Tsukiyama. But he surprises them by grabbing each of them with his hands. He breaks Kaneki's arm and delivers a devastating blow that pierces his stomach, leaving him in a dire state. Toka tries to attack him from behind, but he catches her and inflicts a fatal wound before turning his attention to Nishiki's wife to kill her. At this moment, Nishiki loses hope and recalls when Kaneki defeated him in the past. He returns home mortally wounded and screams in anguish. His wife hears his cries and approaches to check on him, but he loses control due to his hunger and almost devours her. At that moment, Nishiki's wife is shocked and says, "Are you a ghoul?" Nishiki believes this is the end, thinking she will report him. However, she surprises him by taking off her shirt and saying, "Here you go." Nishiki lunges toward her and bites her, but she says to him, "You are the only one who ever valued me. After my family died, I had nowhere to go and was ready to end my life. But you saw me and became the reason I kept going. So, take my life and stay alive, Nishiki." Nishiki is struck with an emotional shock and lets her go. The scene returns to the present, where Nishiki, boiling with rage, attacks Tsukiyama relentlessly. However, Tsukiyama overpowers Nishiki and throws him to the ground each time. Despite this, Nishiki refuses to give up. The fight continues until Nishiki suffers a deep wound to his stomach and is thrown to the ground, yet he rises again, only to be brutally struck down once more. As Tsukiyama moves toward Nishiki's wife to kill her, Nishiki stops him, gripping him tightly and saying, "I won't let you touch her." Tsukiyama lifts Nishiki and is about to kill him, but suddenly Kaneki intervenes, having already planned a strategy with Toka. Toka bites Kaneki to restore her energy and unleashes her Kagune. She attacks Tsukiyama with a single strike, knocking him to the ground. Tsukiyama tries to escape toward Nishiki's wife to regain his strength, but Nishiki blocks his path. Tsukiyama begins kicking Nishiki relentlessly, giving Toka the opportunity to sever Tsukiyama's arm. Tsukiyama collapses to the ground, ending the battle. At last, Nishiki approaches his wife to reassure her, but Toka intervenes, saying, "Stay away from her. This woman has seen us and cannot live because she might report us. I'll kill her here." Nishiki tries to protect his wife, but Toka stabs him multiple times, leaving him incapacitated. When the blindfold is removed from the woman's eyes and she sees Toka, she says, "You are so beautiful." Toka is stunned by the remark, leaving the woman alone and walking out. Later, Toka sits alone, saying to herself, "I'll never be beautiful." After these events, life begins to return to normal, and Nishiki joins the group to work with them. Meanwhile, Emi cries and tells her mother that she wants to see her father. The little girl rushes outside and the story takes a different turn. We see her father, who appears in a medical clinic. Suddenly, a strong man barges in without warning and lands a powerful punch, knocking him to the ground. It turns out the investigators were waiting outside ready for battle. They draw a cocoon weapons from their cases, and one of them says, "We've finally found you, Jason, leader of the ghouls." A fierce fight ensues, revealing Jason to be an incredibly strong opponent. He effortlessly evades their attacks and lands blows with ease. Despite the investigators using their Kagane weapons, they fail to injure him. They corner him, but he breaks their Kagane with a single move. Jason tells them, "That's enough for now, I don't have time, but I'll be back for you later." After Jason leaves, the investigators turn toward Emi's father to kill him. He tries to defend himself with his Kagane, but he's far too weak and is eventually killed. At the same time, Emi's mother reassures her, saying, "Your father will be back soon from work, so get ready." Unaware of her husband's death, the mother takes Emi out for a walk. Suddenly, Emi catches the scent of her father and runs off, shouting, "I'm sure he's nearby." She arrives at the location, only to find that the investigators had lured them using her father's scent. They are cornered, and one investigator says, "You'll both die here." The mother unleashes her Kagoon and orders Emi to run. The little girl is overcome with grief, but her mother yells at her, urgently forcing her to flee. Emi runs through the streets crying for help, but no one pays attention to her. At that moment, Kaneki happens to be walking nearby and sees her by chance. She tells him what happened, and they quickly head to the scene. They arrive to find the mother preparing to fight, but she suddenly freezes in shock. The investigator reveals that he had stuffed her husband's corpse into his case, which is why Emi had smelled him earlier. He had turned her husband into a cocoon weapon after killing him. The investigator taunts her, saying, "Come on, show us more of your grief and hatred." Kaneki, holding Emi, watches the scene from a distance. The mother smiles a sorrowful smile before the investigator decapitates her in front of everyone. Emi breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably, while Kaneki stands paralyzed, unable to do anything but watch. Everyone is shocked by the mother's death, but Tuka is the most enraged, vowing to take revenge on the investigators. Tuka asks the team for help, but the leader refuses, deeming the mission too dangerous. Tuka, unwilling to accept the decision, leaves on her own. Meanwhile, Konichi weeps in regret, blaming himself for being powerless and letting her die right before his eyes. At the same time, the investigator begins planning to kill Emi as well, as if no other ghouls exist besides this family. Later, the investigator's assistant is seen leaving his location while Tuka watches him from afar. The assistant heads to a restaurant where he meets two of his colleagues, sharing laughter and conversation. Afterward, the investigator departs, followed by his colleagues. While walking, Tuka suddenly appears and attacks the first one, killing him instantly. She moves toward the second, but the investigator arrives just in time to save him. A battle ensues between Toka and the investigator, and she quickly overpowers him. However, their leader suddenly appears and begins taunting her, mocking Emi's mother and daughter. Enraged, Toka attacks recklessly, giving him an opening to knock her down. Toka is forced to retreat. Back home, Toka finds Emi crying over the loss of her mother. Toka leaves her for a moment, but when she returns, she's shocked to discover that Emi has disappeared from her room. Toka and Kaneki search everywhere for her, but their efforts are in vain. Meanwhile, Emi arrives at an abandoned tunnel where she discovers her mother's body stuffed inside a bag. She lets out a scream that echoes through the area. Tuka rushes to her while Kaneki notices the investigator approaching from above. Kaneki jumps in front of the investigator. Vowing not to let him harm Emi, Tuka reaches Emi and finds her holding the bag. She asks, "What's that in your hand?" Emi responds, "This is my mother, and I'll never let her go." "What did we do to deserve this? Is it a crime to simply be alive?" Toka embraces her, crying bitterly in a scene filled with sorrow and pain. Suddenly, the investigator appears and begins taunting them, saying, "Did you miss your mother? Did you like the gift I left for you?" Furious, Tuka is overcome with rage. At that moment, Kaneki dons his mask and confronts the investigator in a fierce battle. Kaneki tries to maintain control, avoiding excessive harm, but the investigator lands powerful blows on him. Then, he pulls out his Kagane from his case and strikes Kaneki, sending him flying. At the same time, Toka was fighting the other investigator, who was wildly swinging his Kagane around. However, he failed to notice the narrow space filled with columns, which caused his Kagane to get tangled. Taka seized the opportunity and landed a powerful blow, slamming him against the wall. The investigator turns to Kaneki and says, "I've always wanted to ask you ghouls a question. You eat humans and prey on them without any regard for their families and loved ones. Why do creatures like you even exist? You're nothing but monsters." At the same time, Tuka tells the other investigator, "My friend was killed by your kind, even though she was kind-hearted and never killed a human in her life." The investigator responds to Kaneki, "My friend was just killed by Toka. Why was he killed? Was it because he was an investigator, or simply because he was human?" Meanwhile, Toka asks the same of her opponent. "Why was my friend killed? Was it just because she was a ghoul?" This was a deep conflict between the two sides, each seeing the other as a monster, unable to understand the other's perspective. Kaneki was the only one who could grasp the situation, standing in the middle between humans and ghouls, understanding the suffering of both. At that moment, the investigator used Emi's mother's Kagan to push Tuka back. When Emi saw it, she was struck with intense shock. The investigator taunted her, saying, "Does this look familiar? It's your mother's cocoon." Emi let out a scream filled with pain while Tuka lost her composure and attacked the investigator. However, he struck her in the stomach and mockingly said, "Now which cocoon would you like to die by? Mommy's or daddy's?" Kaneki attempted to reason with the investigator, saying, "Both ghouls and humans are at fault. This conflict must end, and we need to find a way to coexist in peace." But the investigator dismissed him, delivering a blow that sent Kaneki flying. Replying, "I don't have time for this nonsense," Kaneki responded, "Fine, I'll make you understand." He unleashed his ghoul powers, lunged at the investigator, and bit him. The battle began, and Kaneki managed to weaken the investigator and disable his Kagune. Kaneki declared that the fight was over, as the investigator could no longer fight without his Kagune. However, Kaneki's ghoul instincts began to take over, awakening his hunger. He said to the investigator, "Run, please run, or I'll be forced to kill you." The investigator refused to flee and attacked Kaneki, but Kaneki easily threw him aside with a single blow, warning him again, "Please, run, don't make me a killer." Meanwhile, the other investigator was taunting Emmy. While Toka lay in a pitiful state, the investigator prepared to finish her off, but suddenly his arm was severed. It was revealed that Emmy had unleashed her Kogane. She shouted at him, "Don't you dare use my parents' Kogane for disgusting things like this." She attacked the investigator with all her might, leaving him stunned by the power of her Kogane. He muttered, "I'll take your Kogane too." But Emmy lifted him into the air, severed his leg, and threw him to the ground. Toka urged Emmy to kill him and end it, but Emmy replied, "I don't want to kill him. Revenge won't bring back my parents, and it won't help me in any way." The investigator laughed and said to her, "You're right, families should be together. So I'll send you to them now." However, Tulka surprised him with a fatal strike from behind, finally killing him. The other investigator lay on the ground, questioning why Kaneki spared him and why he was crying. At the same time, Kaneki, overcome by hunger, lost control and began searching for flesh to eat. Suddenly, he spotted someone behind him and attacked swiftly, stabbing the figure. To his shock, it was his co-worker from the Anteku Cafe who had come to bring him meat to satisfy his hunger. And so, the battle comes to an end, and everyone returns to their places. The investigator enters the tunnel, finds his boss dead, carries him, closes his eyes, and weeps bitterly. This marks the end of this part of the anime. In the next part, you will witness major twists in the story and a complete transformation in Kaneki's character, who will become an unstoppable force. If you want a second part, just let me know in the comments, and I promise to release it this week. See you soon.